Waddle Dees, the most iconic Kirby enemies. Keeping them simple and lovable, Waddle Dees don't have much deep backstory, but that doesn't mean they don't have some interesting biology lore. Starting with the facts, in Kirby Right Back At Ya, which is 100% canon, and I don't care what anyone says, and I'm going to keep enforcing that, Waddle Dees are shown to have mouths and teeth, but only under a layer of skin that food just kind of slides through. It doesn't really make any sense, and it's made even less sense by DDD's comment on it, which is inaccurate, but whatever. And when they aren't fed enough, they become very aggressive. When seeing this, it's not hard to believe that Marx tried to become a god just because he was hungry. Professor Curio says that Waddle Dees are known to search for someone to rule over them. If no one is commanding them, they just kind of find a spot to stay and sit there and do nothing. We can observe this behavior in-game. Normally, Waddle Dees are thought to be King Dedede's servants, but in lots of games, Waddle Dees are enemies, even when Dedede is playable. In Return to Dreamland, there is no main villain ordering around the enemies, which can be seen as most of the Waddle Dees in that game are mindlessly wandering and doing nothing. And now, with new info from Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, we can yet again see this behavior of Waddle Dees, because they would have literally no reason to follow Magolor, and yet his entire worker base is comprised of Waddle Dees, because they just like to serve people. Also, there is a tiny little bit of evidence that might suggest that Magolor himself is related to Waddle Dees, but there's more evidence on the contrary. I'll just show it up on the screen or something. But in Kirby Triple Deluxe and Planet Robobot, where there are big bads ordering around the enemies, the Waddle Dees are armed and aggressive because they found their master, whose order is to attack the players. Speaking of Triple Deluxe, in it we see what we can only imagine is the older form of a Waddle Dee, the Grand Dees, though we only see them in Floralia, so maybe they're just a different species native to Floralia. People have often made the observation that Waddle Dees are monkeys based on their faces. This is backed up by the Grand Dees, which have obviously gorilla-like features, and with the increase of monkey/gorilla type characters recently, it may be important. Also in Triple Deluxe is a Waddle Dee trainway. We don't know why there's a whole Waddle Dee society here, but the trains seem to be transporting sunstones, so maybe that has something to do with it. Finally, in Royal Road, there are these bug-type Waddle Dees, and I'm just gonna drop this very disturbing fact on you without elaborating because I'm saving it for a future video. Those Waddle Dees are Waddle Dees that have been infected with a parasitic insect that has completely taken on over their body. Kirby lore. Rated E for everyone. There's also Gold Waddle Dees, Silver Dees, Key Dees, Faster Key Dees, I don't think they have a proper name. They might just be called Key DEX or something. And Wapods. The Key Dees have more monkey design reinforcement, and the Wapods, while I can't tell if they're ghosts or genies, are certainly interesting. Unfortunately, we have nothing to really make out of them. The Gold and Silver Waddle Dees probably don't actually exist in canon and are just gameplay devices. There's also the Helicondra Dees, but I don't think they're actually Waddle Dees and that they're just named that because they are functionally just reskinned Waddle Dees in the game. Of course, there is one subgroup of Waddle Dees that stand out from the rest, but we'll get there in a minute. Some may think that Kirby and the Forgotten Land disproves the lore given by the anime because we see Waddle Dees living in their own society. However, one, it's not that Dedede isn't their master anymore, it's just that he's lost. Two, Kirby kind of becomes their master, not directly, but they give him gifts and all kinds of stuff, and he's the one who kind of reassembles them, and they built a statue even. And then of course there's the character Waddle Dees. Sailor Waddle Dee, the Kirby 64 Waddle Dee, and of course everyone's favorite, Bandana Dee. Sailor Dee is one of the Meta Knights and is presumably pilots the Halberd, and from what I can tell is the first Waddle Dee to be shown talking. Kirby 64D is a crafty fellow, sporting all kinds of vehicles and contraptions. For whatever reason, everyone has headcanoned that he later becomes Bandana Dee, but if this was the case, why does Bandana Dee not use any vehicles like 64D. And what people forget is that Bandana D already existed before Kirby 64. So if he was the same character, why didn't he have his bandana in Kirby 64? What makes things confusing is in Star Allies on the title screen, which occasionally will be a reference to a scene from Kirby 64. Sometimes Bandana D is used to represent the Waddle Dee from that game, and other times a Parasol Waddle Dee is used. So which one is it? Well, what I see is that since that Waddle Dee doesn't use a spear or a parasol, they weren't sure which one was closer, so they just alternated between the two. Still worth noting. Everyone loves to nerd on Commentator Waddle Dee, though out of all the unique Waddle Dees from Forgotten Land, he probably has the most actual character. When a mysterious vortex appeared in the arena, he almost shut down the whole operation. Later, he had enough courage to enter through and found even more challengers inside and decided to make it a part of the arena, despite the fact that it is incredibly dangerous because it is a parallel dimension that you just found, full of people that are not friendly competitors and are actually wanting to kill you probably, but whatever. Now it's time for the elephant in the room. Waddle Doos. Normally, no one would bat an eye if one of the random species of Waddle Dee just happened to be Cyclops. That's just how they are. However, due to a cutscene in Kirby 64, a lot of questions are raised. When Waddle Dee gets possessed by dark matter, he becomes a Waddle Doo. Now, at first glance, this could just be a funny reference because Waddle Dee plus creature with one eye would equal Waddle Doo. However, this is dark matter we're talking about, one of the most lore important characters that they wouldn't just goof around with. One thing that's worth noting is that there's no beam attacks from this Waddle Doo, but though that could be seen as somewhat trying to say that it's not a real Waddle Doo. However, dark matter has its own beam attacks, so even if it wasn't an actual Waddle Doo, a dark matter possessing a Waddle Dee would still give it lightning-ish stuff. So I think the only reason it doesn't have lightning attacks is because of the fact that it is supposed to look unthreatening and supposed to be like all weak and pathetic, almost a joke boss, but not quite. Borderline joke boss. It is a wonder how a being is clearly implied to be spread across the universe when it is never seen again after the main source is destroyed. This could explain it. The dark matter that escaped have all possessed Waddle Dees because they're the most common and easy host, and over time they've just infused and become their own species, kind of like the Sectonia Waddle Dees. Now they can grow into their older form, King Doos. There's nothing to say about King Doos though. Some Waddle Doos have been seen speaking, and while dark matter has never been seen speaking, there's nothing that states that they couldn't speak. I mean, the three in Kirby 64 had their own names, and no one could have given them names if they couldn't speak. While it's possible for dark matter to break free from its evil tendencies as seen with Gooey, Waddle Doos usually do work for the somewhat evil King Dedede and are naturally hostile towards you. However, there's one other place we see Waddle Doos born: Krakow. Now, Krakow nowadays has been ensigned with the idea of random things being stuck inside him because he's a cloud, but this idea wasn't added until Triple Deluxe. The most we saw before were bombs, but we could imagine Krakow willingly just had bombs because Krakow is sentient. Krakow has been spitting out Waddle Doos since day one, and they have the same beam attacks and eyes. Now, from what we've discussed so far, Waddle Doos should be dark matter. So for Krakow to be giving birth to Waddle Doos, it would also have to be dark matter. And I'll explain that another day, but for the time being, let's consider him dark matter. So Krakow scoops up Waddle Dees, which are seen abundantly flying with parasols in the sky levels for some reason, and infuses them with dark matter and rebirths them as Waddle Doos. It's the grand rebirth of dark matter. And it was under our noses the whole time. Then, of course, there's one more thing, which is the similarities between Waddle Dees and Woofies. there's all kinds of weird theories going everywhere from evolution to genetic modification, but personally I believe that the Waddle Dees and the Woofies have no connection to one another because the game itself comments on how similar they are, which to me would be implying that they're not actually from the same mold or whatever you want to call it. The only reason they look similar is because HAL Laboratory just wanted Waddle Dees that aren't Waddle Dees to replace the Waddle Dees, since they aren't enemies in this game. But who knows, maybe Kirby Lore's the scientists are so crazy that they decided to take this one thing and turn it both into wolves/foxes and also monkeys somehow. So that's basically everything I can think of on Waddle Dees and Waddle Doos. If there's anything I missed, make sure to tell me in the comments. Like and subscribe for more Kirby lore videos.